There is a village in the Ashanti region, sitting between two low hills the way a sleeping child sits between the arms of its mother, that the old people call Adugyama. It is not the kind of place that appears on any important map. There is no market famous enough to bring strangers from the big city. There is no road wide enough for two lorries to pass each other without one of them breathing in and pressing close to the red earth shoulder. What Adugyama has is the kind of quiet that only comes to places where people have been living for a very long time, where the trees remember the grandparents of the grandparents, and where the soil knows what it has been asked to carry. In the dry season, the dust rises soft and orange from every footpath, and the smell of wood smoke from the cooking fires mixes with the sweetness of ripe mango until the whole village smells like something you once loved and cannot quite name. In the rainy season, the hills go so green they hurt to look at, and the river at the bottom of the valley runs fast and brown and glad of itself, the way rivers are when they have been waiting a long time for water. It was in Adugyama that Serwaa was born, and it was in Adugyama that she expected to die, and she had made her peace with both of these facts a long time ago. If this story is already warming your heart, please hit the like button and subscribe to Village Heart, and drop a comment below telling me where in the world you are watching from. I love knowing our little village reaches so far. Amma was 43 years old and had the hands of a woman who had worked every single day of those 43 years without much complaint. She was a seamstress. Had been since she was 12, when her mother sat her down in front of an old singer machine brought to the village by a woman returning from Kumasi, and said, "Watch," and Amma watched, and then her mother said, "Now do," and Amma did, and she had never stopped doing since. She could cut a dress from memory, no pattern, just her eyes and her fingers and her sense of how fabric wanted to fall. Women came to her from 3 villages away for their children's school uniforms, their Sunday dresses, their funeral cloths in the deep red and black that the tradition required. She worked by lamplight when the day ran away from her, which it often did. Her husband, Kofi Serwaa, had been a good man. A quiet man, the kind who expressed love through proximity rather than words, who would simply appear beside you when things were hard and stay there without being asked. He had farmed the small plot behind their house, a strip of land his own father had given him on the day of his marriage, and he had coaxed yam and cassava from it every season through patience and attention and the deep understanding that comes from knowing a particular piece of earth the way you know a person. He had died 4 years ago. A fever that seemed ordinary until it was not. He was gone in 11 days. Amma did not speak of this often. Not because the grief had passed. Grief of that particular kind does not pass. It changes shape, that is all. She did not speak of it because she had 2 children to raise, a son of 15 named Kweku and a daughter of 12 named Abina, and she had decided without exactly deciding that her grief had to stand outside and wait while her children were still growing. There would be time for it later. There is always time for grief. It is the most patient thing in the world. She owed money. That was the truth of it. Plain and heavy as a stone on the chest. The medical fees from Kofi's illness had been borrowed from 3 different people, and though she had paid back 2 of them slowly, carefully, the way you pay back things when you can only spare small amounts at a time, the 3rd remained. That 3rd debt belonged to a man named Opoku, who owned 3 houses in the village and a provision store by the market road, and who had a way of looking at you when he passed you on the path that reminded you, without saying a word, of exactly what you owed him. The look that said, "I am patient, but I am not forgiving." The debt was not enormous by the standards of the city. By the standards of Adugyama, it was a mountain. Amma had been climbing it for 4 years. She was sitting outside her house on the evening that everything began. The evening she would think about for the rest of her life as the evening the world turned over gently and placed itself in a different position. She was hand-stitching the hem of a funeral cloth by the last of the daylight, her reading glasses, which she had bought second-hand from the market in town and which were slightly too strong for her eyes but better than nothing, perched on the end of her nose. Abina was inside doing her schoolwork. Kweku had gone to the river with his friends the way 15-year-old boys go to rivers, supposedly to fetch water and actually to do everything but. The shouting started from the upper end of the village, from the compound that belonged to the Mensah family, which sat on a slight rise above the main path and had always seemed to Amma slightly proud of its position, the way things on rises often are. The voice doing the shouting was young. Sharp. The voice of a man who had recently been given an opinion of himself and was still adjusting to the weight of it. Amma recognized it, as everyone in Adugyama would have recognized it. Because voices in small villages are as familiar as faces, as distinctive as the particular way a person walks. It was the voice of Kwame Mensah, who was 31 years old and who had returned from the city 2 years ago with money enough to expand the family compound, a new car the color of smoke, and a wife named Ifua who wore her hair in the style that required chemicals and who looked at the village the way you look at something you have been told to appreciate but cannot quite manage. Amma put her sewing down. She could not hear the words yet. Only the tone of them, which was enough. That particular tone, the tone of a man who has decided something and is performing the deciding so that anyone nearby will understand that he has decided and that the decision is final. That tone carried through the evening air the way bad news always carries, farther and faster than anything gentle. Then the words became clear, because Kwame Mensah was not the kind of man who kept his voice low when he was making a point. I said go. I said go and I mean go. There is no more discussion. And then another voice, older, rougher, threaded through with something that sounded like it had been threaded through with pain for a long time. The way old cloth sounds when it is pulled, the fibers giving in quietly one by one. Kwame, son, where am I supposed to go? You are not my problem. You gave me this compound. It is my compound. Ifua is my wife and this is her home now. Go and find somewhere that will take you. The old voice said something then that was too low to carry. Whatever it was, it did not change anything, because a few moments later the gate of the Mensah compound opened and a man came through it the way a man comes through a door when he has not chosen to open it himself. He came through the gate and stopped, and stood, and looked at the path in front of him as if he was trying to remember how paths worked, how one foot went in front of the other, how a person moved from one place to another when they did not know where the other place was supposed to be. He was old. Perhaps 70, perhaps more. Thin in the way that sickness makes a person thin. Not the leanness of hard work but the particular reduction of the body when it has been fighting something it is slowly losing. He had on a white cloth wrapped around his waist and a shirt that had once been good and was now soft from washing and faded to the color of old sky. He carried nothing. Not a bag, not a bundle. Not even a cloth to wrap around himself against the night that was coming. Amma stood up. She was not the only person who had heard. In Adugyama, as in all villages where the compounds are close enough to each other that cooking smells pass freely between them, the hearing of one person's business is simply a consequence of proximity, unavoidable and generally accepted. 2 women had appeared at the entrance of the compound next to the Mensah families. An older man was standing at the edge of his porch 3 houses down. Children had gathered with the particular alertness of children, who understand very early that raised voices mean something important is happening and who position themselves accordingly. Everyone was looking at the old man. No one moved toward him. The old man, whose name was Kofi Mensah, though Amma would not know this yet, took a slow step down the path and then another, and there was something in the way he moved that Amma recognized the way you recognize pain that is being hidden, the specific carefulness of someone who is hurting and has decided that the hurting is private. He looked neither left nor right. He looked at the path. He walked the way people walk when they know eyes are on them and they are determined to give those eyes nothing to report. He had walked perhaps 30 steps when he stopped. Not from choice. He stopped because his body said stop, and when a sick man's body says stop, it does not make the request in a way that leaves room for negotiation. He put one hand against the wall of the path's edge, one of the low cement walls that marked the boundary of someone else's land, and he pressed it there and steadied himself, and Amma saw him close his eyes for just a moment. She looked around at her neighbors, at the 2 women who had come out to look and were now speaking to each other quietly, shaking their heads, at the old man on his porch who had already turned and gone back inside, at the children who were being gathered up and moved away by a mother who had appeared from somewhere, walking quickly and deliberately, the way adults move children away from things they have decided children should not see. In this village, in any village, everyone knows each other's history. They knew that old Nana Kofi had built the compound where his son now stood with his new wife. They knew he had transferred the deed to Kwame when the boy married, which had seemed at the time like the natural and generous thing a father does when his child takes a wife and needs a home. They knew that Nana Kofi had been unwell for some months, though exactly what kind of unwell was spoken of in the vague way that villagers speak of illness in old people. A word here, a shake of the head there. They knew all of this, and they were watching the result of it from behind their doors and over their walls, and not one of them was moving. Amma thought of Kofi. She thought of his last 11 days, of the particular helplessness of watching a person you love hurt and being unable to stop it. She thought of how many times in those 11 days she had needed something, help, a hand, someone to sit with her for an hour so she could rest, and how she had never asked, because asking felt like admitting how bad it had become, and admitting how bad it had become felt like something she could not afford. She thought of the people who had come without being asked. 2 of them. Only 2. She could still tell you their names. She folded her funeral cloth carefully, placed it on the stool, removed her reading glasses, set them on top of the cloth, and walked down her path toward the old man. Nana Kofi heard her footsteps and opened his eyes and looked at her. He was not a small man, even reduced by illness. He had been, she could see in the structure of him, the width of his shoulders, the way he stood even now when standing clearly cost him something, a physically substantial person. His face was the face of a man who had seen a great deal and processed most of it quietly. His eyes were dark and clear, clearer than she expected from someone who had just been pushed through his own gate by his own child, and they watched her approach with a wariness that she understood immediately. The wariness of someone who has already been turned away once tonight and is bracing for it to happen again. "My name is Amma Serwaa," she said. She stopped in front of him, not too close, close enough to speak without raising her voice. "I live there." She pointed to her house, which was visible from the path, the low blue-painted building with the small veranda where her sewing things were still spread out on the stool. "You look like you need to sit down." He looked at her for a moment, then at the house, then back at her. He had the expression of someone who is calculating something, though she could not have told you what. "I do not want to be a burden," he said. His voice, up close, was careful, deliberate. It was the voice of a man who chose his words the way a mason chooses his stones, testing each one before placing it. "You are not a burden," Amma said. "You are a person standing in the road. Come." She turned back toward her house and she heard his footsteps behind her, slow but steady, following. She did not look back to check. Looking back to check, she felt, would have been the wrong thing. When you offer help and a person accepts it, you do not look back at them as though you are surprised they are still there. Abina looked up from her schoolwork when they came through the door, and her eyes went to the old man behind her mother, and she did the calculation that children do, quick and instinctive, and said nothing, simply watched with the patient attention of a child who has been raised by a woman who handles things and who trusts that the things will be handled. Kweku was not back. Yet. "Sit," Amma told the old man, gesturing to the chair, the good one, the wooden one with the cushion that she had bought from the market in town and which was reserved for guests and for days when her back was giving her trouble. Nana Kofi sat down, and the sitting was the sitting of someone who had been needing to sit for longer than they had been allowing themselves to admit. Amma went to the kitchen, which was the room at the back of the house, and she stood there for a moment looking at what she had. There was fufu in the pot from the evening meal, enough left for Kweku when he came back. There was a small amount of groundnut soup, gone a little thick now, the way groundnut soup goes when it has sat a while. There were 2 plantains on the counter. There was a little smoked fish wrapped in old newspaper that she had been saving to use in tomorrow's stew. She considered the fufu for only a moment. Then she uncovered the pot, shaped what was there into a serving, poured the soup over it, added some of the fish, and carried it to the man sitting in her chair. Nana Kofi looked at the bowl she placed before him and was quiet for just a moment. A silence so brief and so contained that she almost did not catch it. Then he looked up at her. "You did not have to do this," he said. "Someone has to," Amma said. And she went back to the kitchen to make herself the plantains instead. She could hear him eating. The quiet sounds of it. She stood in the kitchen in the lamplight and listened to those sounds and felt something she could not quite name. Something that lived between sadness and rightness. The feeling you get when you do a thing that costs you something and you know, even while it is costing you, that you would do it again. Kweku came back from the river to find a stranger in his chair and his mother making plantains in the kitchen. And he stopped in the doorway with the water container in his hand and the look on his face that 15-year-old boys get when the world does not arrange itself the way they expected it to. Amma came out of the kitchen before he could say anything and looked at him in the particular way mothers look at their children when they are communicating without words. And Kweku, who was a reasonable boy, looked at the old man, looked at his mother, and set the water container down and went to wash his hands. Nana Kofi slept on the mat in the main room that night, with Ama's spare cloth folded over him and a small lamp kept burning low in the corner the way you keep a lamp burning when someone is sleeping in a strange place and might need to find their bearings in the night. Ama lay on her bed and listened to the sounds of the house. The breathing of her children. The night insects outside the window. The occasional shift of the old man turning on the mat, trying to find a position comfortable enough for sleeping. She thought about what she would tell Opoku when he came asking about his money next week. She thought about Kweku's school fees, which were due before the end of the month. She thought about the 3 dresses she still had to finish, the funeral cloth she had not completed, the school uniform that the woman from the next village was expecting by Friday. She thought about all of these things and then she put them aside and listened to the breathing of the old man on her mat and thought about the expression on his face when she set the bowl of fufu in front of him. Not gratitude, not exactly. Something quieter than gratitude. Something that looked like a person being reminded that the world still contained acts of the kind they had stopped expecting. She slept. In the morning, she woke before the others, as she always did, and went to the kitchen to start the fire for water. When she came back through the main room, she found the mat rolled neatly against the wall and the cloth folded on top of it with a precision that spoke of a person who had spent their life being tidy. The old man was not there. Her heart gave a single, startled beat of something she would not have been able to explain. She went quickly to the door and opened it, and found Nana Kofi sitting on her veranda in the first light of the morning, looking out at the village as it began to wake, the smoke rising from the cooking fires, the sound of someone's radio playing church music in the distance. He had arranged her sewing things on the stool beside him, not moving them away, just straightening them carefully, the cloth folded, the thread wound, the scissors placed parallel to the edge of the stool. "You straightened my things," Amma said. "You left them out last night," he said. "I thought it might rain." He looked at her. "It did not rain." "No," she said. "It did not." She went back inside to make the morning porridge and thought about the hands that had straightened her sewing things. Hands that shook a little, she had noticed. But careful hands. Hands that paid attention. Breakfast was simple, as it was most mornings. Porridge made from corn, with a little groundnut paste stirred through it, the way her mother had made it. She brought a bowl to Nana Kofi on the veranda and sat on the low step below him, not at the same level, not below, just nearby. The way you sit when you are sharing a morning with someone you do not yet know but are beginning to. He ate without complaining, which was something she noted without knowing why she was noting it. "How long have you been sick?" she asked. She did not ask it gently or cautiously the way some people ask difficult things, wrapping the question in so much softness that the question itself gets lost inside the wrapping. She asked it plainly, the way plain people ask plain things. He looked at her over his bowl. "Several months," he said. "My joints. My chest. Sometimes. The doctors in the city said it is manageable." "Have you been managing it?" she asked. A small pause. "Not as I should," he said. She nodded. She understood what "not as I should" meant in a practical sense. It meant medicine that ran out and was not refilled because of cost, or because the place that dispensed it was far, or because the person who helped you remember to take it had gone away, or all 3 of these things at once. "Do you have medicine?" she asked. He was quiet. She stood up and took his empty bowl inside and thought about the small amount of money she kept in the tin beneath her bed, the emergency amount, the amount that was supposed to be for something catastrophic and that she had been adding to slowly for 2 years. She thought about it and then she stopped thinking about it because the thinking was not going to help anyone and the deciding had already happened somewhere behind her thinking, in the place where her real decisions were made. She asked Abina to sit with the old man while she walked to the provision store at the end of the main road, not Opoku's store, the other one, where a woman named Aqua sold medicines brought from the town pharmacy alongside her sugar and her tomato paste and her kerosene. She described what Nana Kofi had told her as best she could, and Aqua, who was not a pharmacist but who had been selling medicines in this village for 20 years and whose knowledge was therefore a particular combination of the practical and the approximate, found her 2 things she recognized and 1 thing she would need him to confirm. Amma paid for them. She walked back home in the morning sun. Kweku was outside splitting wood for the fire, which he had begun doing without being asked 3 years ago and which still surprised her every time she saw it. Abina was inside, Amma could hear her voice, and as she came through the door she found her daughter sitting cross-legged on the mat in front of Nana Kofi's chair, telling him about something that had happened at school, her hands moving the way her hands always moved when she was recounting a story, as if the words needed physical assistance to reach their destination. Nana Kofi was listening, not with the patient, tolerating half attention that adults sometimes give to children's stories. He was listening the way a person listens when they are genuinely interested, his eyes on the girl's face, his head slightly inclined, asking a question at the point in the story where the question was most useful. Amma stood in the doorway and watched this for a moment. Then she walked in and put the medicines on the table and told him what Aqua had said, and he looked at the packets and something moved behind his eyes, a recognition, and he said yes, that one is right, and the other one too, and the third I am not sure about, and she said then we will leave the third one until we can find out, and he nodded. She gave him water and watched him take the first 2 tablets, and then she went to her sewing machine and sat down to work on the funeral cloth, because the work did not stop being needed simply because her life had become more complicated, and the funeral cloth had to be finished by Thursday. She was stitching when she heard him speak to Abina again, something about the school subject her daughter had been describing, mathematics, which Abina found difficult and which she had been explaining this difficulty in the same terms she had been using for 2 years, in the terms of a person who has accepted the difficulty as a permanent personal feature rather than a temporary problem. And Nana Kofi said something to her that Amma could not quite hear, and Abina was quiet, and then Abina said, "Oh," and then was quiet again, and then said, "Can you say it again?" And the old man said it again. Whatever it was. Amma stitched the funeral cloth and listened and did not look up. That afternoon, Kwame Mensah came. She heard his car before she saw him, the particular engine sound of the smoke-grey car that everyone in Adugyama knew, because it was the only car of its kind in the village, the kind that announced itself from a distance with its own importance. The car stopped on the road outside and Kwame got out, and he was wearing good trousers and shoes and the expression of a man who has been arguing with his wife about something and has come out to do a thing he is not entirely sure he wants to do but has been directed to do. He came to the entrance of Amma's path and stopped there. He did not come through. He called out her name. Amma set her sewing down. She went to the door. She stood in the doorway and looked at him. He was a young man. She remembered him as a boy, remembered his mother, who had been a quiet woman and had died when Kwame was perhaps 12, after which Nana Kofi had raised the boy himself and sent him to school in the city and paid for his education and the continuation of his education, and Amma had understood from what she had gathered over the years, a good deal else besides. "I heard my father is here," Kwame said. He did not look directly at Amma. He looked at the house behind her. "He is here," Amma said. "He needs to come home," Kwame said. "He cannot stay with you." Amma looked at him with the particular attention of a woman who has been managing difficult things for a long time and has learned that the quality of her looking communicates something that words sometimes cannot. "Your father needs medicine," she said, "and rest, and food that is regular. He can have those things here." "He cannot," Kwame said, and his voice had an edge to it now that was the edge of a man who is embarrassed and does not want to be seen to be embarrassed, which is usually when people become sharpest. "He cannot because my wife has said," and here he stopped and seemed to hear what he was about to say and his jaw tightened, and then he said something slightly different. "He cannot because he is my responsibility and I am taking him back. Your father is in my house because you put him in the road last evening," Amma said. She said this quietly, not accusingly, the way people say things when they want to start a fight, but matter-of-factly, the way you state a condition that everyone already knows. "You put him in the road while he was sick and it was getting dark." Kwame's face did something complex and then settled back into the expression he had arrived with. "That was," he said, and stopped. What he did not say was that it had been Ifua. That Ifua had said she could not be expected to live in the same compound as a sick old man. That sickness in the home brought a kind of heaviness that she could not tolerate. That she had not agreed when she married Kwame that his father would be her permanent responsibility. That it was not what she had signed for. He did not say that he had agreed with her in the slow, wearing way that people agree with someone they love when the agreeing is easier than the fighting. He did not say that he had told himself Nana Kofi would be fine, that someone would take him in, that the village would manage as villages managed, and that he had believed this because he needed to believe it. He did not say any of these things. He will come home, Kwame said again. From inside the house came the sound of Nana Kofi's voice. Not raised, not aggressive. Simply audible. Let me speak to my son. There was a silence. Amma stepped to one side to clear the doorway. Kwame came through the path, and Amma went to her kitchen and stood with her back to the doorway, the way people stand when they are not trying to listen but cannot help hearing. Kofi, Kwame said. His voice had changed inside the house, as voices sometimes do when they are suddenly in a smaller space with someone they have known all their life. Lower. Less certain. Nana Kofi said his son's name with the weight of the full name, the name given at birth, the name given by a father, and that weight was enough to make Kwame go quiet. There is nothing more to say tonight, the old voice said. Go back to your wife. I will speak to you when I am feeling stronger. Father, you need to come home. I am not going anywhere tonight, Nana Kofi said. That is all. A long silence. Amma heard the rustle of Kwame. Moving, the uncertain movement of a man who has been dismissed and is not sure whether to accept the dismissal. Then she heard him walk back through the door, back down the path. She heard his car. She heard it drive away. She stood in the kitchen for a moment. Then she went back to her sewing. Nana Kofi said nothing to her about what had passed between him and his son. She said nothing about it either. The evening came quietly, the way evenings come in the dry season, in a deepening of orange and then a sudden dark. Kweku came in from helping a neighbor with a fence repair that he had been asked to do for a small payment. Abina had finished her schoolwork and was reading. Amma made the evening meal. When she brought Nana Kofi his food, he looked at her for a moment before taking the bowl. You are a good woman, Amma Serwaa, he said. I am a woman who has a pot with enough in it, she said. That is all. He shook his head slowly. He said, that is not all. But he did not say what the more was. She went back to the kitchen and stood there in the lamplight and thought about the day. She thought about the medicines she had bought and the money in the tin beneath the bed that was now a little less. She thought about Kwame's face in the road outside, the complicated thing it had done when he was trying to decide what to feel. She thought about Abina saying oh in the particular way she said oh when she understood something she had not understood before. She thought about the old man's hands, folding her cloth, arranging her scissors on the stool in the morning dark. The care in those hands. The precision. She thought about what kind of man does that. What kind of man wakes in a stranger's house in pain and in difficulty and reaches first for order, for neatness, for making the small world around him less burdensome to the person who has allowed him into it. Outside, the village settled into its nighttime sounds. A dog called somewhere distant and was answered by another even further away. The river, which could not be heard in the daytime over the sounds of people living, became audible at night, a low and patient voice beneath everything else. Amma turned down the lamp. She went to check on the children and then she went to her own room and lay down on her bed and listened to the night and to the old man breathing on his mat and thought about tomorrow, which would bring its own things, as tomorrows always did, and which she would meet the way she met everything. One stitch at a time. She did not know, lying there in the dark of her ordinary house in her ordinary village, that 3 days from tonight everything she knew about the weight of what she was carrying would change completely. That the man sleeping on her mat was not merely an old man turned out of his home by an ungrateful son. That those careful hands had built something in this world that she did not yet know to look for. That the answers to questions she had been carrying for 4 years were sleeping in the same house with her, waiting, the way answers often wait, in complete silence and perfect patience, for the moment when the right person finally stops moving long enough to hear them. She did not know any of this yet. She only knew that the lamp was low and the night was quiet and someone needed the kindness she had given, and that was enough for tonight. She closed her eyes. The village breathed around her, slow and dark and old, the way it had breathed for generations, and another night passed into the keeping of Adugyama's patient hills. The second day began the way second days begin when someone new is sleeping in your house. With the small adjustments. The recalibration of a space that has been organized around a certain number of people and must now accommodate one more. Amma was up before the light, as always, and she moved through the house quietly, the particular quietness of a woman who has spent years performing the early morning in a way that does not wake her children. She had one additional consideration this morning: the old man on the mat, who she expected to still be sleeping. He was not sleeping. He was sitting up on the mat in the dark with his back against the wall and his eyes open, and when she came through with the lamp he looked at her without startlement. The way people look when they have been awake for some time and have grown accustomed to the dark and are simply waiting for someone else to arrive in it. "You did not sleep well," she said. It was not a question. "I slept," he said. "Older people sleep in sections. You will understand when you are older." She lit the lamp on the table and went to the kitchen. She heard him, slowly, getting himself to his feet. The sounds of it, the effort in the sounds of it, she catalogued without meaning to. She had catalogued those same sounds for 11 days 4 years ago, and the habit had not entirely left her. She made the fire quickly, the way you make a fire when your hands have been making it for 30 years, almost without thinking, the mind elsewhere while the hands perform their familiar work. She thought about the funeral cloth, which she had finished the hem on the night before and which needed only the border stitching now. She thought about the school uniform that was due on Friday. She thought about the fact that Nana Kofi's medicine needed to be taken with food, and that there was cassava and some eggs, and that this was enough for this morning, though she was not certain about tomorrow. She did not think about opoku. She had trained herself not to think about opoku in the early morning, because thinking about opoku in the early morning had a way of making the whole day feel like it was climbing uphill. Nana Kofi appeared in the kitchen doorway, dressed, his cloth arranged neatly. He moved better than he had the night before. Not well, she would not have said well, but the particular rigidity of someone whose body has been cold and uncared for had eased somewhat. As if the medicine and the food and the warmth of the mat and the cloth she had given him had done what medicine and food and warmth and cover are supposed to do, which is hold the body together long enough for the body to remember how to hold itself. "Can I sit in here?" he asked. "This is a kitchen," she said. "People sit in kitchens." He sat on the low stool in the corner, the three-legged wooden stool that Kofi had made the year Kweku was born, and he watched her work the fire and prepare the morning. She was aware of being watched in the way you are aware of it when the watching is not intrusive, when it is simply the attention of a person who finds the ordinary activities of another person interesting rather than dull. Most people, when they watched someone cook, watched the food. Nana Kofi watched her hands. "You are left-handed," he said after a while. "I am," she said. "My daughter was left-handed," he said. He said it the way you say something that contains more than it appears to contain. Matter-of-factly, with the flatness of a thing that has been carried a long time and no longer stings in the same way though it has not stopped being felt. She looked at him. "Where is your daughter?" He was quiet for a moment. "Gone," he said. "Many years ago. She was young." Amma turned back to the fire. "I am sorry," she said. "Yes," he said simply. The morning moved. The children woke and went through their morning preparations with the varying degrees of enthusiasm that 15 and 12 years bring to the task of becoming ready for the day. Kweku moved quickly and wordlessly, still adjusting to the presence of a stranger in the house, doing the careful thing young men do when they are not sure of a situation, which is to remain efficient and peripheral and give themselves time to observe before committing to any particular feeling. Abina had no such reserve. She said good morning to Nana Kofi with the directness of a child who does not yet understand the complicated adult business of pretending not to see things. And when he said good morning back and asked her whether she had thought more about what they had discussed the day before, the mathematics thing, she sat down immediately and began talking about it, pulling her notebook from her school bag and opening it on the table. Amma listened to this from the kitchen. Nana Kofi said, "Let me see how you set this up." Abina showed him. He was quiet for a moment, looking at the notebook. Then he said, "Here. You are thinking of this as one problem. It is two problems wearing the same clothes. Separate them." Abina looked at the page. She separated them. A pause. Then, "Oh," she said again, that sound that was beginning to become familiar, the particular "oh" of a mind encountering the reorganization of something it had been carrying upside down. Amma poured the morning porridge. After the children had gone to school and Nana Kofi had taken his medicine and they had sat together in the quiet of the veranda with their respective drinks, the slow companionable quiet that had begun to establish itself between them the previous evening, Amma picked up the funeral cloth and her needle and began to stitch the border. And the old man, who seemed to have decided that silence was not something either of them needed to perform, said, "You do good work." She looked at the cloth and then at her stitches, which were even and close and made in the way her mother had showed her, with the needle entering at exactly the same depth each time so that the line they made was straight without being rigid, like a well-kept path. "It is what I know how to do," she said. "That is not a small thing," he said. "To know what you know how to do and to do it well." He paused. "I spent many years trying to do things I did not know how to do." He said it with a particular quality in his voice, not regret exactly, something more considered than regret. The quality of a person who has had a long time to examine something and has arrived at a clear-eyed understanding of it. "What things?" she asked. "Being a father," he said. She looked at him. He was looking at the village in front of them, at the path, at the children passing on the way to the borehole, at a woman walking with a headload of firewood, the particular grace of balance that women who carry things on their heads acquire so early it becomes invisible. "I was better at building things than at raising them," he said. He said it without self-pity, which made it sound both more honest and more sad than self-pity would have. "You sent him to school," Amma said. "To the city. For his education." Nana Kofi was quiet. "Yes," he said. "I sent him." He paused. "You can send someone a very long distance and still not know whether you have given them the right things for the journey." Amma stitched the border of the funeral cloth and thought about this. The visit from Opoku came at mid-morning, which was earlier than his usual pattern, which itself told her something. News traveled in Adugyama the way it always travels in small villages, on its own legs, faster than anyone who carries it, arriving before the person who sent it has finished deciding to send it. Opoku would have heard by breakfast that old Nana Kofi Mensah was sleeping on Serwaa's mat, and he would have drawn conclusions from this the way Opoku drew conclusions from everything, which was to say swiftly and in the direction of his own interests. He came through the path with his hands in his pockets, a short, well-fed man in a good shirt, with the careful walk of a person who wants to appear unhurried and is not succeeding entirely. He stopped when he saw Nana Kofi on the veranda. He looked at him with the recognition that people in the same village always carry for each other, the recognition of a man known by sight if not in any deeper way. Then he looked at Amma. "I have been meaning to speak with you," he said. He said it to Amma, but his eyes returned to Nana Kofi with a curiosity he was making insufficient effort to conceal. "Then speak," Amma said. She did not put her sewing down. Opoku adjusted himself. He looked at Nana Kofi again with the pointed look of a man who would prefer the conversation to be private. Nana Kofi, with the contained perception of someone who reads situations accurately and quickly, said, "I will go inside," and moved to rise. Amma said, "You will stay where you are," and he settled back, and she looked at Opoku and waited. "The money," Opoku said. His voice had the tone it always had when he spoke to her about money, not cruel, not harsh, but smooth in the way that smooth things can be more unsettling than rough ones, because roughness at least announces itself and gives you time to prepare. "The end of the month is close. The same as I told you last month, and you brought me something, not everything, something. And the month before." He looked at her steadily. "You understand, Amma, I am not a bank. I do not exist to carry other people's debts indefinitely." "I understand," Amma said. She did not stop stitching. Opoku's eyes moved to Nana Kofi again. "I heard you have taken in Mensah's father," he said. He said it neutrally, as if the information itself was neither good nor bad, simply interesting. "He needed somewhere to stay," Amma said. "And you decided that somewhere was your house. With your children." Opoku's voice remained smooth, but something moved beneath the smoothness now, something that was not quite an accusation and not quite concern. The thing that passes for concern in the mouth of a man who is actually calculating. "You are taking in other people's burdens when you cannot manage your own." "He is not a burden," Amma said. She set the cloth down on her lap and looked at Opoku directly. The look that her children knew and that people who had done business with Serwaa also eventually came to know. Not aggressive. Not afraid. Simply clear. He is a sick old man who was put in the road by his own son. That is the situation. And I do not need your advice about what to do about it. Opoku looked at her for a moment. Then he looked at Nana Kofi, who had been sitting throughout this exchange in the way of a person who is absorbing something carefully without showing that they are absorbing it. Then he looked back at Amma. "End of the month," he said. And he walked back down the path. The silence after he left was the comfortable kind. Amma picked up the funeral cloth and found her place in the border stitching. Nana Kofi said nothing for a while. The village moved around them, ordinary and indifferent to what had just passed between the woman on the veranda and the man in the good shirt. A child ran past with a hoop. A rooster made his opinion of the morning known from somewhere behind the next compound. "How long have you owed him money?" Nana Kofi asked. "For years," she said. "My husband's illness." He nodded slowly. "Do you have the full amount?" She paused for only a moment. "No," she said. Another silence. He reached forward and picked up a spool of thread from the stool beside him, the wrong color, and set it back, and picked up the correct one, and held it out to her, because she had been reaching for it. She took it without comment. A small, unremarkable act. The kind that says, "I am paying attention to you," without saying anything. The third thing happened that afternoon, and it was the thing that made Amma begin to feel the first edge of what she could not yet have named. She had sent Nana Kofi to rest when she saw his eyes growing heavy after the midday meal, the medicine and the warmth working on him together, and she was at her sewing machine when a woman appeared at her path, a woman she knew by sight and by village reputation, one of the women who had appeared the previous evening at the neighboring compound and watched Nana Kofi from across the path and then gone inside. Her name was Adwoa Frimpong, and she sold vegetables at the market on Tuesdays and Thursdays and was the kind of person whose opinions circulated through Adugyama with the efficiency of a well-run postal system. She did not come inside. She stood at the path entrance with her hands clasped in front of her and her face arranged in the expression of someone delivering news while simultaneously performing concern. "Amma," she said. "People are talking." Amma kept her hands on the machine. "Let them talk," she said. "They are saying you should not have taken him in." Adwoa's voice was careful, the voice of someone who is repeating what others have said while maintaining just enough distance from the saying of it to protect herself. "They say it is not your business. The Mensah family is the Mensah family. You are interfering in a family matter." "He was in the road," Amma said. "In the dark. While he was sick." Adwoa shifted her weight. "Yes, but..." She paused. "But what happens when Kwame comes again? When his wife comes? You have put yourself in the middle of something. And you have your own debts, everyone knows." She said this last part gently, which made it sharper rather than softer. Amma looked at her. She thought about the correct response. She thought about it for the length of time it took her to stitch 3 stitches on the cloth she was working on. Then she said, "Adwoa, if you had been that man in the road, in the dark, sick, with nowhere to go, and you came past my house, would you have wanted me to leave you there because it was complicated?" Adwoa opened her mouth and closed it. She looked at the house and then at the path and then back at Amma. Then she said, "I would have gone to family. Someone more." She stopped. She heard herself. Something crossed her face that was not quite shame but was in the neighborhood of it. She looked down. Then she looked up. "I will bring vegetables tomorrow," she said. "The ones I do not sell. I usually give them to the chickens." She said it quickly, quietly, as if the quicker and quieter she said it, the less it counted as the thing it clearly was. She turned and walked away before Amma could respond. Amma sat at her sewing machine and looked at the path where Adwoa had stood. Then she turned back to the cloth and continued stitching. That evening Ifua came. Ifua was 26 years old and had the particular confidence of a woman who knows she is beautiful and has organized her life around this knowledge the way some people organize their lives around a skill or a principle or a faith. She was wearing a dress in the city style that made her look somewhat overdressed for the dirt path of Adugyama, which Amma suspected was intentional. She came to the path entrance and called out, and her voice had the quality of someone who is accustomed to being heard and attended to, who has arranged her voice to carry that expectation within it. Amma came to the door. "I have come for Nana Kofi," Ifua said. She did not say good evening. She said it as if retrieving the old man were an errand she had been sent on, similar in nature to collecting something from the market, uncomplicated and practical. Amma looked at her. "He is resting," she said. "I did not ask what he was doing." I said I have come to take him home. Ifua's chin lifted slightly. Amma said, Ifua, this old man is sick. He has not slept in a proper place or eaten regularly or had his medicine for longer than he should have gone without these things. He is resting now because his body needs rest. If he wants to go home when he wakes, that is his decision. It is not mine and it is not yours. Ifua's eyes went hard and bright the way eyes do when a person is deciding how angry they can afford to be in a situation they have not fully anticipated. He is my husband's father, she said. He belongs at home with his family. He was put in the road by his family, Amma said. The same quiet, the same clarity. She was still standing in the doorway and had not moved from it, which meant Ifua had not come through the path, which meant this conversation was happening across the distance of the entrance, and the distance was appropriate. Ifua looked at the house behind Amma. She looked at Amma. Something moved behind her eyes that was more complicated than anger, something that involved, Amma thought, a layer of the awareness that very young women sometimes carry when they are confronted with older women who are not impressed by them. The awareness that the thing they rely on most is not the thing that earns them anything in this particular exchange. He will make you regret this, Ifua said finally. Kwame will not forgive this kind of. She paused, searching for the word. Interference. I am not asking Kwame to forgive anything, Amma said. I am asking him to care for his father properly. If he does that, there is nothing for any of us to discuss. Ifua looked at her for one more moment. Then she turned and walked back up the path toward the Mensah compound, her dress moving around her with the particular quality of fabric that has been chosen to be noticed, and Amma stood in the doorway and watched her go and thought about what the word interference cost, and decided it cost nothing she was not already willing to pay. Inside, Nana Kofi was awake. He was sitting on the mat with his back against the wall and his eyes open, and she knew from the quality of the silence that he had heard. Not everything, perhaps, but enough. She said nothing to him about what had passed. She went to the kitchen and began making the evening food, and after a while he came and sat on the stool in the corner and watched her hands in the lamplight, and she let him watch, because there was nothing in the watching that required managing. Kweku came home. Then Abina. The house filled with the small sounds of the evening, the sounds of a family organizing itself for the close of a day. Kweku did his homework at the table with his pencil, making the particular scraping sound it always made. Abina, unprompted, brought Nana Kofi a cup of water and set it beside him on the floor near the stool, the way she set things beside her father's chair in the evenings when she was small, before she could have known that this was what she was remembering. Nana Kofi looked at the cup, then at the girl. He said, "Thank you, Abina," and she said, "You're welcome, Nana," using the honorific without any self-consciousness, in the natural way children adopt the correct term for a person once the person has clarified themselves in the child's understanding. After the meal, after the children had gone to their room, Amma and Nana Kofi sat again on the veranda in the dark. The village at night. The cooking fires reduced to their last orange. The sky thick with stars, the way skies in places without electric lights still become thick with stars, the way they used to be everywhere before people started turning everything bright. Amma, Nana Kofi said. He said her name the way he had begun to say it, not tentatively, not with the caution of someone still assessing their welcome, but with the quality of a name that has been placed into the category of known and trusted things. "Yes," she said. "Tell me about your husband." She considered this. Not whether to tell him, but where to begin. There is a certain kind of telling that has to start in the right place or it does not work, and she was finding the right place. He was a quiet man, she said. Quiet in the way that certain things are quiet. Not empty. Just, you had to be still to hear what he was saying. He expressed love like that. Through being nearby. He would just appear when things were hard. Not with speeches. Just, he would be there. Nana Kofi was quiet for a moment. "That is a good kind of man," he said. "It is," she said. "Yes. How did you manage?" he asked, after. She thought about this honestly. "I did not manage at first." She paused. "Managing came later. At first I just continued. That is different from managing. Managing means you have organized yourself. Continuing means you are still going even though you have not organized anything. Even though every day is chaos and the only reason you are still moving is because you have children who need you to be moving." She paused. Continuing came first. Managing came later. I am still somewhere between the two. He made a sound that was not a word but was an agreement. The sound of a person who understands what the difference between continuing and managing feels like. Your son, Amma said carefully. Kwame. What was he like as a boy? Nana Kofi was still for a long time. He was, the old man said slowly, a boy who wanted to be approved of. Very much. More than most children. He would work hard at a thing not because the thing interested him but because he wanted to be told he had done it well. He paused. I did not always tell him. I thought he should learn to do things for their own sake. Not for the telling. He was quiet again. Perhaps I got that wrong. Perhaps the telling was what he needed, and I was too. He stopped. Too what? Amma asked. Too certain that I knew what he needed better than he did. She looked at him sideways in the dark. He was looking at the stars. He had the kind of face that is easier to study when the person is not looking back at you, and she studied it now. The structure of it. The width of the forehead, the set of the jaw. A face that had once been a commanding face, she thought, and that now carried its authority differently, quietly, the way authority shifts when the outward forms of it have been stripped away and only the essential thing remains. The ring on his right hand caught the starlight. She had noticed it the first evening. A heavy ring, not decorative. It had the quality of something functional, something that meant something in the world beyond Adugyama. She did not ask about it. My wife would have known what to do, Nana Kofi said. With Kwame. She always knew what the children needed. I was busy. Building. I thought that was the same as providing. He paused. It is not. Amma said nothing. Sometimes the most useful thing to say is nothing. He looked at her. You have built a good home here, he said. With very little. He said it directly, not as a compliment exactly. The way he said everything, as an observation. A report of what he saw. And what I see is true and worth saying. I have built what I could with what I had, she said. That is all anyone can do, he said. And what you have built here. He looked at the house, at the blue walls, at the children's shoes outside the door, at the tidy veranda, at the stool with the sewing things arranged on it. This house has something in it that a lot of bigger houses do not have. What is that? She asked. The sense that the people inside it are known to each other, he said. That they have looked at each other. That they are not strangers sharing a space. He paused. You feel it from the outside. I felt it the moment I walked through the door. Amma was quiet for a long moment. Go and rest, she said. Your medicine will be better with sleep behind it. He got up. He went inside. And she sat on the veranda alone for a while longer, looking at the stars over Adugyama, thinking about being known and about the difference between a house and a home and about the fact that the man sleeping on her mat had been put out of a compound worth more than everything in this village combined and had walked through her simple door and said, this house has something. She thought about that for a long time. The third day, the day that everything changed, began as quietly as the other two. It began with Amma at the sewing machine before the light came up, finishing the border stitching on the funeral cloth by lamplight, her reading glasses on her nose, her hands doing the thing her hands knew how to do while her mind went wherever it needed to go. It began with Nana Kofi on the veranda before she had even realized he was up, watching the village wake the way he seemed to like to watch things, with the unhurried attention of someone for whom the watching itself is the point. It began with Kweku splitting wood and Abina eating porridge and reading the same book she had been reading for 3 weeks because school reading moved slowly in a house where the lamp oil had to be rationed and the evenings were for other things. Ordinary. The ordinary weight of an ordinary morning in a small Ashanti village. If this story has found its way into your heart, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new tale from Village Heart. Your support is what keeps the fire burning, and more stories like this one coming your way. The change, when it began to come, came first as a sound. A car. Not Kwame's car, she knew that engine. This was different. A larger sound, deeper. The sound of something that moved a great deal of road without difficulty. She heard it slow on the main road. She heard it stop. She heard a door. Then another. Nana Kofi, on the veranda, heard it too. She was watching him when the sound reached them, and she saw what happened to his face. Not much. He was a man who had practiced stillness the way some people practice prayer, until it was no longer an effort but simply the natural condition of his features. But something moved. Something behind the eyes reorganized itself into an expression she had not seen there before, not fear, not quite, but the close cousin of fear, the one that lives next door to it and shares its wall, the one that belongs to people who have been hoping for something and do not know, when the moment arrives, whether hope is going to prove to have been worth the hope. Amma, he said. His voice was the same. Exactly the same as it always was, careful and deliberate. And yet there was something in it. The way you hear something in a bell that has been tapped lightly that tells you, even before it fully rings, what the full sound will be. Yes, she said. There may be some people coming, he said. He said it looking straight ahead, toward the main road. I need to ask you something. She waited. He turned and looked at her directly. The full attention of those dark, clear eyes. He looked at her the way he had been looking at her these 3 days, with the quality of a man who sees what is actually in front of him, who does not add to it or subtract from it or arrange it to suit what he needs it to be, but simply looks. Whatever you hear from them, he said slowly, and whatever comes of it, I want you to know that it was here that I rested. He paused. It was here that I was given what I needed. He paused again. And I will not forget that. She looked at him for a moment. I do not know what you are telling me, she said. I know, he said. I am telling you before I can show you, so that later, when you understand, you will know that the telling came first. That it was not gratitude for what came after. He held her gaze. It is for these 3 days. Only for these 3 days. Which were enough. Amma opened her mouth. And then the footsteps came up the path. There were 3 of them. 2 men and a woman, all dressed in the manner of people from the city, not the careless manner of people who wear city clothes because they do not know what else to wear, but the deliberate manner of people who have chosen what they are wearing the way you choose the right tool for a specific work. The men were in dark suits despite the morning heat, one younger, one perhaps 50, with the face of someone who has spent many years being careful about his face. The woman carried a leather satchel and a look of controlled urgency, like a person who has been searching for something important and has been trying to appear not as if they have been searching. They came through Amma's path without stopping to call at the entrance, which was itself a statement of a kind, the kind made by people who are accustomed to their entry being expected and accommodated. They came through the path and then they saw Nana Kofi on the veranda and they stopped. The older man in the suit looked at Nana Kofi for one long moment. Then he spoke a name. Not a village name. Not a name like Kofi or Mensah or any of the familiar syllables of Adugyama. A name that was longer and more formal, the kind of name that comes with weight attached, the kind of name that people in rooms far away from this veranda recognized and used in a particular tone. Nana Kofi said, Asante. Come. The older man walked forward with quick steps, not the steps of a man conducting business, the steps of a man who has been genuinely worried and is now genuinely relieved. And he reached Nana Kofi and stopped and looked at him the way you look at something you are confirming is really there. And then he said, Sir, we have been looking for you for 2 days. The phone, your phone was not. He stopped and looked at Amma. Then back. Sir, the board meeting was yesterday. We had to postpone. We have been. Nana Kofi raised one hand. Steady, he said. Sit down. The man Saturday. Not on the veranda, there was nowhere to sit. He went immediately to stand beside the wall with the posture of someone trained to be useful in whatever configuration the situation required. The other man and the woman had come forward too and were standing with the same quality of readied attention. Amma was still standing in her doorway. She was watching all of this with the expression of a woman who has lived long enough to know when the shape of a thing is changing, even when she does not yet know what shape it is changing into. She was very still. Nana Kofi looked at the older man. Asante, he said, this is Amma Serwaa. This is her home. She is the reason I am well enough for you to find me. The older man looked at Amma. His expression shifted into something that was not quite recognition. You do not recognize a person you have never seen, but something adjacent to it. The look of a person who is revising and understanding very quickly and finding the revision to be significant. Amma, Nana Kofi said. He said her name one more time. the way he had been saying it these 3 days, with the quality of something settled into. I think it is time for me to tell you who I am. She looked at him. At the ring on his right hand. At the 3 people in city clothes standing in her path with the organized urgency of people whose entire function is to attend to one specific person. At the man himself on her veranda, thin, sick, drinking her water and sleeping on her mat and watching her hands and talking about his son and the daughter who was left-handed and the wife who knew what children needed. She thought she had already understood who he was. She thought these 3 days had told her. The precision of his hands. The quality of his attention. The way Kwame had transferred the compound to him instead of receiving it as an inheritance, which meant the transfer went in a direction you only went if the thing being transferred was large enough to require a formal legal act. The way he spoke about building things. The ring. The way those 3 people were looking at him. She had thought she understood. But when he told her, when the older man opened the leather satchel and placed on her veranda table, right next to her sewing, the document with the letterhead that she had to read twice to be sure she was reading it correctly. The document that was the board agenda for the company that even Serwaa in Adugyama had heard of. The company whose trucks passed through the main road to the city carrying goods with its name on the side. The company that the women in the market talked about the way people talk about things that seem to exist at an incomprehensible distance from their own lives and yet which their own lives are somehow threaded through. The company that had built the clinic in the district capital and the school block in 3 villages over. When she saw his name at the top of the document, the full name, the name with its titles and its position beneath it, she understood that what she had understood was only the beginning of understanding. She stood in the doorway of her house and looked at the old man on her veranda. He looked back at her with the same eyes he had looked at her with for 3 days. Nothing in those eyes had changed. He was still the same man who had folded her cloth in the dark. Who had watched her hands. Who had talked about his left-handed daughter and his wife who knew what children needed. Who had said, "This house has something." He was also this other thing. Both at once. "You," she said. Her voice came out quietly. Steadily. She was a steady woman even when steadiness cost her something. "You are." "Yes," Nana Kofi said. He said it the way he said everything. Plainly, without additional architecture around it. The plain yes of a man who had stopped pretending, possibly some years ago, that he was anything other than what he was. She looked at the document on her table. Then at the 3 people in the path. Then at him. "And you were in my house," she said. "Your house," he said, "is the best place I have been in a very long time." He paused. "And I did not know that until I was in it. Sometimes you have to lose the version of yourself that has everything before you can find the things that matter." From down the path, from the direction of the Mensah compound on its slight and proud rise, came the sound of another car. Kwame's car. The smoke-gray engine she knew. Coming toward them. Not knowing yet what was waiting. Not knowing what the village was about to be asked to reckon with. What the son who had put his father in the road was about to be asked to understand. Serwaa stood in the doorway of her house, in her reading glasses, with the funeral cloth she had been finishing still in her hands, and she watched Nana Kofi Mensah, the man she had fed and sheltered and given medicine to and listened to in the dark of the veranda, the man who had helped her daughter understand mathematics and folded her cloth in the morning, the man who was also one of the most significant figures in the industry that built the roads and the clinics and the school blocks of this region. She watched him turn toward the sound of his son's car with an expression that contained, in equal measure, grief and love and the complicated dignity of a man who has decided that what needs to be said will now be said. She said a quiet thing to herself. Not out loud. Not for anyone else. The kind of thing you say when the world has just rearranged itself and you are finding your balance in the new arrangement. The kind of thing you say when you realize that the act you performed in the simplest terms, giving a sick man somewhere to sleep, giving him food, giving him medicine, treating him as a person rather than a problem, that this act was witnessed by someone who had the power to make of the witnessing something lasting and real. She said, "Kofi," her husband's name, as if he could hear it, as if he was nearby, the way he always used to be nearby, the way she still sometimes felt him nearby in the early morning when the house was quiet and the fire was just starting and the day had not yet become anything but possibility. She said his name and then she stepped off the veranda and walked toward the path to meet whatever was coming. Because that was what Serwaa did. She met things. She had always met things. And she was not going to stop now. Kwame arrived to find his father flanked by 3 company officials on a poor widow's veranda. The village gathered. No one spoke first. Nana Kofi looked at his son for a long time, then said simply, "She gave me what you could not. A bed. A bowl. Her last medicine money." Kwame's face broke in the way that faces break when shame finally finishes its slow work. Ifewa stood behind him, silent for the first time. Nana Kofi settled Ama's debt that same afternoon, funded Abina's schooling, and built a proper workshop beside her house. He moved into a modest room nearby. He never left Adugyama again. Thank you for sitting with this story all the way to the end. If it moved you, I think you'll find a home in the other videos on your screen right now. And if you haven't subscribed yet, come join us. There's always a place by the fire at Village Heart. Until next time.